So High Guardian Spice was released late last year and was instantly the internet's favorite punching bag for a good few weeks. I'm late to the party, but in my defense, I had to sit down and actually watch this show. High Guardian Spice was off to a bad start even before it had started production, being advertised as Crunchyroll's first original show in a new lineup of content called Crunchyroll Originals. This angered the majority of Crunchyroll's paying members because for years, Crunchyroll's motto had been that you should pay for a premium membership on their streaming site instead of pirating anime because Crunchyroll directly supports Japanese studios and, more importantly, their animators. If you're not up to date on the animation industry in Japan, it is dire.
給料っていくらぐらいですか？
毎月最初会社に入った時は固定給で新人だったんで出るんですけど、それが5万円で会社を出てフリーランスになった時は4万円3万円とかでやってましたね。今やっと5万6万くらいは稼げるようになったんですけど。
毎月？
月ですね。
Turnover rates for animators in Japan are unsurprisingly super high, which has created a situation where there aren't enough animators to go around. The animators who do stick with it are all very passionate about their work, and companies take advantage of that passion to squeeze as much productivity as possible from these people until they quit or die.
So having your streaming service market itself as the alternative to pirating because the money supports the industry, only to then announce it was setting up an entire new branch dedicated to creating its own original non-anime content, while it also opened up studios owned by Crunchyroll, all with the funding of its members, is what we call a bad look. So the audience was already annoyed by the time High Guardian launched its first trailer, although calling it a trailer is false advertising since it showed no animation, no character introductions, no story summary, absolutely nothing of the show itself apart from some rough background work and one promotional image, and instead focused on marketing the newly minted studio having all its creative directors and producers be women. Ray Rodriguez had come out as a trans man after this, but at the time it was marketed as an all-women creative production team. Alkaline burns just as bad as acid is all I'm gonna say on that. So yeah, just a terrible introduction to this show, instantly poisoning the well and making the majority of Crunchyroll's user base openly hostile towards the concept, as not only were they now being served a bait and switch for their payment, but the non-anime Crunchyroll owned show had nothing to show for itself to garner any kind of faith in what they were making, most likely because this trailer was pumped out prematurely to try and temper the bad feelings towards Crunchyroll originals, as well as Crunchyroll using progressiveness as a shield in an attempt to deflect the rightful anger at its mismanagement of its customers' money by either winning support from underrepresented audience members or painting anyone who had criticism as just a sexist anime weeb incel whose anger isn't valid. All that happened in 2019 and would be the high point for this show as things continue to spiral downhill from there. Now, there is a lot of behind the scenes drama, like a lot. Enough for me to make an entire hour-long video simply going through the events. However, the pre-production hell, the volatile online harassment from both creators as well as the general internet public, the hateful sexist comments by several of the staff, the death threats and hateful sexist comments from Twitter users, the suspicious handling of the show by Crunchyroll, and the general dodging of responsibility and poor management of the entire affair has no doubt been covered and documented many times over by other YouTubers. I have had to wait before watching any myself because I didn't want my opinions to get skewed by other people commenting on the topic before I started what is now going to be a series of videos because I had too much to say. While looking for official art to use in this video, I came across a blog called the High Guardian Spice Archive, which exists purely to document the production and its many problems in a relatively unbiased tone. If you'd like a breakdown of this show's baggage, I can recommend it. I also saw in the image search that Kiwi Farmers has documented the show's drama as well. I assume their forums discussing it will be very biased in tone, but may have a lot more of the finer details locked down in case you're someone who isn't averse to the farms. I don't go there myself, but I understand its usefulness. The thing is, because of this extremely toxic production and all the mudslinging involved, I feel the real-world drama has overshadowed the show's quality as an end product. Crunchyroll's diversionary tactic by uttering the word feminism had done what it intended to do, in that now whenever the show is mentioned, we have to talk about the feminist angle before we can even talk about the show's quality. It's also done its job in that many people, regardless of where they stand or what opinions they hold, get tripped up by the word feminism and LGBTQ and end up responding to the words in whatever way, eventually getting completely redirected to discussing the larger topics instead of pushing it to the side to ask the question, but is the show actually good? This is nobody's fault. I just had to front load this entire video mentioning this because it's a subject you cannot pretend isn't sitting in the middle of the room. However, it's also important to recognize the extremely effective way it's used to divert discussion and attention away from the show itself and turn every conversation about High Guardian Spice into an ancient Greek debate. And not the kind where everybody stands around looking intelligent and important, but the kind where Diogenes is throwing chickens and biting people. If I could, I would have cut this entire first section out of the video completely and just actually talk about what the show is like, but I felt it is important to give proper context into the behind the scenes situation. However, I'm not going to go too deeply into the wider discussion because these subjects are complex issues and as such, they deserve to be treated and discussed with the importance and maturity they require. Also, I'm not here to personally attack any specific individual involved in the show's production, regardless of what I feel about some of the things they've said or done. I'm interested in looking at how they managed and executed the project. However, it's borderline impossible and arguably irresponsible to ignore the kind of individual who is the person in charge of all aspects of the show. In this case, the creator, character designer, writer, and series director, Ray Rodriguez. I don't know what type of person Ray is in reality. I can only give comment on what he himself has made a choice to put publicly online and how his words and work reflect back onto him as a creator. And what the work and his public behavior reflects to me is that this is someone who is far too inexperienced to have been given the reins of being in charge of an entire show. Remember, Rodriguez isn't only the character and scenario designer, he is also the creator, which means director of all departments, not just art. Everything that appears on screen had to be reviewed and passed by him to make it into the show. This goes from writing to storyboards to animation to final execution. He may not have been the head art director who gives feedback and guidance to the art department, but he is the head series director, which means the art director had to deliver their department's materials to him to be approved and marked as finalized. And nothing about the show's execution, nor things Ray himself has said publicly, makes me feel he is seasoned enough to have been burdened with so much responsibility. Ray is a creator who has referred to the characters in the finalized and produced show as his OCs, as a character being another character's senpai, as well as this tweet, which originally I had a whole sequence on why it's ridiculous, but it was kind of mean and ultimately not very constructive, and we've got enough to talk about as it is. But I wanted to mention these things because they paint a rather clear picture of the person who is quite literally running the show, and his level of maturity and professionalism. This is the guy in charge. Good grief. And now, about 9 years later, we can actually talk about the show. We first get hit by this disclaimer. Remember this disclaimer. It will be important later. The intro theme song is fine. It's fine. I don't like the font choice for the credits, but whatever. The song is actually not bad at all. I'm guessing if I tried to play all of it, YouTube would yeet this video into the sun, but it's genuinely catchy. Actually, you know what it reminds me of? We start the cartoon and are right away introduced to our main characters, Rosemary and Sage.
Sage, it's finally here! Can you believe it? I almost can't. We've been preparing our whole lives for this day.
I'm so happy I have you as my best friend, and I love Lisa so much.
We get their families awkwardly introduced as quickly as possible before Rose and Sage travel to the academy to become guardians. What's a guardian, you might ask? I have no idea, and the show makes no attempt to tell us. We learn Sage's parents expect her to become a healer, which I'm guessing is the family business based on their outfits, and Rose is given a big sword that belonged to her mother. I'm also very confused by the character design for Rose's brother. His paler colors make him stand out from the others, and he looks like this in the intro, suggesting he has a major part to play in the story, which is why he's designed in a way to draw the eye. He does not. This is one of 2 times outside the intro he is on screen.
Sage, don't forget Chompy.
Wait, is that? Is that Scarborough Fair? Did you seriously decide to use Scarborough Fair as your leitmotif for this show? Why? Okay, let me explain. So, Scarborough Fair is an English folk song that's roughly dated to around the 1600s. It gained popularity in recent years thanks to Simon and Garfunkel in the late 60s, and you might have heard it recently when Ninja Sex Party released their cover of it in 2020. Their cover's really good, by the way. The story of the song is about an impossible love a man has for a lady who lives in Scarborough Fair in northern Yorkshire. He tasks the listener of the song to tell her to weave a shirt with no thread or needlework, and then to wash it in a dry well, and if she completes these tasks, they will be together forever.
Tell her to make me a cambric shirt, parsley, sage, rosemary, and thyme.
I originally gave the show the benefit of the doubt that the names of the characters came first, and when Rodriguez realized the lyrics of the song matched, he decided to implement it regardless of tonal relevancy. But according to Wikipedia, they were named after the song, which is worse, because it displays a willful ignorance to the song's story. My friend said it reminded her of when teenagers put ill-fitting songs in their fanfics, and at first I agreed, but actually no, because at least when teens are kind of tone-deaf about this sort of thing, they almost always use ill-matched songs because at least the song itself made them feel something. At least the song had some or other emotional resonance with them. I have no idea why this is here other than my OCs. Basically what you've done is this.
By the rising of the moon, by the rising of the moon, for the pikes must be together by the rising of the moon.
This may seem like a really small nitpick that isn't really important, but it sets a precedent for what is going to be the biggest problem for the show as a whole. And that is weird, meaningless story decisions. The pacing of episode 1 is... I can only call it terrible, I'm so sorry. But the pacing is awful. Each episode of High Guardian Spice is around 22 minutes with a total of 12 episodes. So it has more or less the exact same time to work with that Madoka Magica did to tell its story, just as a comparison. If you want a non-magical girl comparison, it has the exact same amount of time to tell a story that Erased did. The first episode opens up and our characters name themselves, say how excited they are to leave and become guardians, and talk about their personal motivations for wanting to go within the span of a few seconds. We then have them meet their individual families who see them off as they climb aboard this ostrich wagon, which they then take to this bus, which they then take to this barge, which they then take to this train, which takes them to the city of Lindbergh, where the Guardian Academy school thing is located. Here they meet Sage's cousin Anise and her wife Aloe, which then take them to their home. Clumsily mention old and new magic. Rose has a Steven Universe flashback about her mom and is sad about it. Then, in a completely unnecessary scene which you could literally cut, the characters have breakfast when nothing of importance is said. I'm not joking, it's just a lot of, would you like breakfast? Haha, don't get in Aloe's way in the kitchen. I sure like food. Hell, I could have cut this from the review and you wouldn't even notice, except this is the famous bread PNG scene, so I have to mention it.
It's beautiful.
I was going to compliment the backgrounds of this show because a lot of them are genuinely good, but the quality dips dramatically in certain shots and just gets worse as the show goes along. At least the colors of the show are nice. It is very hard to try and explain pacing in a condensed review format, but the plot and character relevant things we learn across the 22 minutes of the first episode is: there is a school where you can become a High Guardian. Rosemary's mother was a High Guardian and Rose was given her sword. Her mother is missing, presumed dead, and Rose is sad about it. Sage's parents want her to become a healer. These doohickeys are new magic, and new magic is incompatible with old magic. Sage's cousin lives in Lindbergh, where the school is located. We get a glimpse of future main characters, Best Girl Parsley and Time. Twice. Rose has a locket with a picture of her mom in it and she's sad about it. Now it may sound like I'm leaving out world building details in this list, like what is a High Guardian? Why is there an entire school devoted to becoming a High Guardian? Why did Rose's mom go missing? What is new magic and what is old magic? How is magic and being a guardian tied to each other? What is the city of Lindbergh like? Why does it look like every single city in an isekai? But apart from talking about new and old magic once or twice, none of these things are ever developed any further than establishing them and then delegating them to offhanded mentions while we focus on the really important details, like the fact that Anise and Aloe are married. Almost every single scene of the 22 minutes of the first episode take way too long on a mechanical level, or ultimately mean nothing. Why did we need to see Rosemary and Sage go from an ostrich wagon to a bus to a barge to a train? The barge adds absolute zero net worth to the episode, characters, or setting and could be completely cut and lose nothing. Why did we have to see the extended cut of these bootleg Totoro's mating dance when we never see this animal ever again at any point in this show whatsoever? The things which get the most attention, not only in episode 1 but in the show as a whole, is this show's creators going, "These are my OCs, Anise and Aloe." Anise is a spunky lesbian and Sage's cousin who lives in Lindbergh. Despite Sage's family using old magic techniques, Anise prefers a more modern approach. She's married to a woman named Aloe, who is an elf. Aloe and Anise are married.
Because they're lovers. Okay?
When Anise and Aloe hold hands, the combined power of their love lets them use magic, which Anise couldn't do otherwise. Something new and old magic, I guess? Don't ask me about the magic system too much, I haven't figured this part out yet. You know what it reminds me of? It reminds me of early 2000s webcomics, which would have the story happen in the actual comic, but then have pages upon pages of supplementary material that went deeper into the setting and creatures and races and character bios. Except the show has nowhere to give all this pointless plot irrelevant trivia, so it just shoved the character bios into the show itself and not bothered with the world building details at all. Which ends up with us having long conversations about how being transgender works in this world for several minutes, which has no relevance to the plot and exists only because the creators are really proud of these details and are desperate for the audience to know about them. I'm not just talking about the queer content here, by the way. Do you want me to show you the full squirrel mating dance sequence? Because I had to sit through the entire school mating dance sequence. These animals are never seen again. I genuinely don't know what's worse. Cramming meaningless character minutiae into the show itself and using up all your runtime on things that don't matter while ignoring plot crucial details, or telling your audience to do homework using extra material which will end up being quiet reading if you want to understand what the basic plot is.
¿Por qué no los dos?
Anyway, the time not spent this episode showcasing side characters is spent on characters having really mawkish conversations that'd be right at home in a 1940s Dad Knows Best TV show, or like a Darman video.
I'm going to explode. You're not going to explode. Well, what would you do if I did? I'd put you back together. You say that so confidently.
You could say that these conversations are here to familiarize us with the characters, but they come across as so fake and performative that by the end of the episode, you don't feel like you know anything more about these characters than what you could pick up from the cold intro. The majority of the episodes following the first do handle their pacing slightly better, but the pacing of individual episodes slowly build upon themselves and becomes a bigger and bigger problem as the show continues. I know I'm stuck on the pacing for a long section here, but it's important to understand that this is the biggest and most prevalent problem, but it's also the hardest to explain without actually watching the show. The best I can do is show you how much nothing can be cut from the opening sequence alone. Trust me, not a single ounce of important information has been removed here. Now granted, there's an intro sequence. I've just combined it with the travel sequence because it's the first episode, so you can do that. This is just one way you could reduce the time though. Leaving everything as is and just cutting things like the barge sequence, the meaningless back and forth with the bus driver, or this part while boarding the train would already really help the flow. You could even have them board a train at the start, fade to the intro, and then fade back to them getting off the train. There are 1,000 ways you could tighten this up. Also, yes, I see the very obvious Kiki's Delivery Service inspiration here. I just don't have anything interesting to say about it other than I see it, which honestly is not really a crime, it's just, oh hey, I like that movie too. Anyway, we need to keep going, so moving on. Oh yeah, I like Azumanga Daioh too. Episode 2. We get inside the High Guardian Academy, and this is where we learn a new detail about this show. This show really, really, really wants to be Harry Potter. And I don't mean this show is using the setting of a magical school as was popularized by Harry Potter. I mean this show really wants to be Harry Potter. I'm surprised there aren't schoolhouses. But we do have classes devoted to seemingly nonsense magical skills portrayed to look whimsical more than anything practical. Faculty made up of magical creatures. Care for magical creatures class. School tests that seem overly complicated and also weirdly specific. Hallways with changing paintings. The headmaster or headmistresses in this case are both wise as well as quirky. There are teachers who knew the main character's parents when they were young. Teachers who seem more interested in murdering their students than teaching them. Botany involving magical flora that could kill you. This class, which gives me really big divination vibes, as well as just the overall feel, if that makes sense. There are a lot of things that may not be direct comparisons to Hogwarts, but damn if it's not giving me Hogwarts vibes.
Welcome, 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 Hogwarts.
We still don't know what a High Guardian is, and the show has not given us any hint of what a High Guardian even looks like. The closest it's gotten to showing us is Rosemary's mother, Lavender. But then apparently Sage will become a great healer if she goes to this academy and become a High Guardian? Are her parents High Guardians? Guardians also protect nature or something? The show has still not explained the foundation of its own title. It's just thrown us into a magical school setting and gone, we've all read Harry Potter, we know how this goes. What the show tries to be is Harry Potter meets Steven Universe, when what it is Harry Potter fanfiction meets My Life Me. The episode starts and we're introduced to the headmistresses called the Triad. I actually like this. The triple goddess concept of the maiden, the mother, and the crone is thousands of years old and directly tied to witchcraft in general. Except I have to remind myself that this show has nothing to do with witchcraft. We're supposed to be learning how to be guardians. Is a guardian a witch? Is Lavender a witch? I don't know.
Guardianship is something special. But what is it exactly? If you knew, you wouldn't be here.
Wait, you don't know either? The longer I stop to think about any surface level idea in this show, the more I feel like I'm going insane. We meet up with Parsley and she's dragged along the surly Time, who's her roommate. So Parsley is the kind of person to make friends easily and have people naturally drawn to her. Noted. So the students need to make up their own definition of what a guardian is and present it at the end of the day. This isn't a terrible concept and can actually work as a good backbone for the show as a whole. Have characters make statements at the start of the show on what their priorities are, and then at the end of the show, have them make new ones and see how those priorities have changed.
Sage is here to master magic, and Rosemary, you're on the warrior track, like me. And Time's on both tracks since she's got that Fairy Woods background, so...
Is this academy just a character creator screen? Not the Skyrim kind, I mean like the Pathfinder kind that take like 2 hours. It was at this point where the pacing was bothering me enough to wonder if the show didn't use storyboards. See, there's this absolutely insane thing certain shows will do, often the bad cash-ins, where they will just skip the refined storyboarding stage and just use the sticky note stage for finished storyboards. I legitimately don't know how they work without proper storyboards. I've never worked on a project without proper storyboards, but since storyboards and animatics are what dictate the timing of an entire episode, from voice acting to editing to the animation, I was curious if they had just skipped this part. Is this for the entire show? This can't all be for one episode. What the actual fuck? Why? Normally, most shows have 2, maybe 3, sometimes only 1 storyboarder on a single episode. Episode 2 of High Guardian Spice has 8. I thought Rodriguez said this show was bad because it had no budget. How are you paying all these people then, Rodriguez? I even double-checked with some of my industry friends to make sure I wasn't overreacting, but why? Anyway, they go to their classes where Parsley's job as an actual blacksmith gets her bumped up to 3rd year classes in metallurgy. Meanwhile, Sage seems really off-kilter and saddened that she and Rose have different schedules. Remember this. Remember this! Rose meets a character who will end up being more important later called Snapdragon. I'll talk more about him later, but I just want to point out that although this is a design choice I usually like, it's a little weird to have his eye design completely different from every other character. It's not a big deal, I just notice it every single time this character's on screen. We also get introduced to...
Don't worry, I'm here. At ease, Pores.
My new favorite character. See, this is what happens when your main characters sound insincere and fake whenever they talk. I imprint on the bitchy trash gremlin.
Hey, you should apologize! You should apologize for that posture, sweetie. You look like an invertebrate.
At the end of the day, the Triad tells the group that their vows were good, but it seems they don't fully understand what a guardian is yet join the club. They then make the entire group listen to everyone's vows, which sounds mortifying. I bring it up because we get our introduction to another character that we'll see more of later, Parnell.
I vow to protect ghosts and grogs, and also people, but first ghosts and grogs.
Parnell is great. The Triad then tells them the kind of things they should have made their vows about.
To protect and keep the land, holding it dear. I promise balance, keep history alive, and never be constrained by its relics. I vow to stay curious and engaged, to look at the world with questioning eyes. I honor my name, my family, and my one true self, my multitude. This I vow.
Well, that's all well and good as far as vague platitudes go, but what are the practical real-world applications of a guardian?
Okay, bye.
Oh.
Being a guardian can kill you.
They just say that stuff about death to scare people who aren't willing to do the work.
No, they don't. They say you might die because you might die.
Does anyone here have any concept of what a guardian is? Episode 3. We get a recap that just reinforces that being a guardian means nothing outside of vaguely worded concepts of chivalry. The Triad does say what I mentioned earlier about revisiting the vows though, so I'm glad the show was able to recognize this as a solid structure to build upon. Then Rose breaks her sword, an important and dear gift from her mother. Oh, well done. Time rightfully shades Rose for not taking care of her weapons and is generally being antagonistic, except to Parsley, who, despite the fact that Time seems very antisocial, she refers to as Pars, saying she'll see her later.
I've ruined the one thing that matters to me.
Wait, what about the cake locket? Stay consistent between consecutive episodes challenge. Professor Caraway asks Rose to stop by his office to talk about her choice of focus during free period. I'm not super fond of the voice actor's performance if I have to be honest. It's not the worst thing I've ever heard, heck it's not even the worst thing in the show, but it's just on the edge of stilted where I notice it every time he talks and it's distracting. I can see the actor reading the script when he speaks. I'm guessing this is the actor's first or at least an early job, considering this show is proudly non-union. But really, this actor could very well go on to improve with time if given the opportunity. Oh. This episode we get a lot of Steven Universe flashbacks to Rose's mom, usually doing something with Rosemary and her sword, and this background staying the same between shots is bothering me. And we learn the sword's name is Flowering Thorn. These scenes are here to remind us that Rose's sword is her mother's, and that her mother is no longer around and Rose is sad about it. Anyway, she goes to meet this Snape did nothing wrong character voiced by the show's creator, who gives her an extended talk about how he knew her mother when they were young, and then explains how being trans works in a setting where there are no limitations to the magic system, shapeshifting is so common as to be mundane, and people can make castles out of sausages.
Make a castle out of sausages.
We also get an extended flashback, and Rosemary learns that the sword was broken before she flung it around. Not having any consequences for our actions. We love to see it. After all of that, we finally get to the point. Rose needs to pick a focus for her free period. Oh wait, enough of that. We need to focus more on Rose's mom and the sword. Did you know Rose is sad about that? Meanwhile, Parsley is concentrating on metallurgy as her focus. She gets given a little Harry Potter quest to fix a skew portrait in one of the hallways that changes when she straightens it, using a very small and seemingly unimpressive hammer. Fixing the painting opens up a trapdoor into what appears to be old catacombs beneath the school. She uses the tiny hammer to work her way through the tunnels, looking to escape. She comes across a cave full of trabbers, who she immediately befriends with her kind personality and asks for their help. They lead her to a non-Euclidean broom closet and, using the tiny hammer, she climbs up until she trees between the walls of the school. Apparently there was also a bunch of stuff off screen we skipped while we watched the third flashback of Lavender in this episode. She finds 3 nails and, upon hammering them down, is back in the smithy, where she learns this was a test for her to be resourceful when only having one tool at her disposal. She is gifted the tiny hammer as a reward. We never see this hammer again. Meanwhile, Sage is having a bit of inner conflict as her parents raised her to only use old magic. She wants to use more new magic, but she's struggling because she's not used to it. She also finally explains the difference between old and new magic. With old magic, you have to draw it out of the earth and it can take a physical toll on you, whereas new magic...
This new magic stuff, there is no cost. They can just do things. Cut their hair, fly around the world, make a castle out of sausages.
That seems really poorly thought out as far as world building goes. Oh, also, Rose gets 3 flashbacks about her mother during this episode, but we have to learn about Sage's inner conflict by her literally standing around telling us about it in words. Well, she tells her cat. Oh, she has a cat now, by the way. It's called Neppy Cat. Not Neppy, specifically Neppy Cat. Wait, is that a Homestuck thing?
Oh, great. An infestation of nerds.
Oh, thank fuck. Amaryllis and Snapdragon interrupt because the script needed them to mess up Sage's potion and...
Ooh, are you going to...
Oh no!
So Neppy runs off because he has a mission now, apparently. I love her so much. Anyway, Time tries to fix everyone else's mess, but it doesn't stop Neppy for long. He then goes on to beat the shit out of this tree. Time has had enough of this, and this time puts Neppy to sleep properly. Turns out though, Neppy was trying to stop these weird black roots from spreading on this tree. Sage berates Amaryllis and Snap for messing up her potion.
I meant to cast a gentle, harmless spell. You're a jerk.
Oh, someone has a type. Good for him. Whatever it was that was making the tree sick, Time immediately reacts to it with horror. The episode ends with Rosemary saying that for her free period, she's gonna focus on being a fighter.
I wouldn't say protected exactly. It was more that we didn't cut it in half with swords.
And Rosemary, you're on the warrior track, like me.
By the end of your time here, you will understand in full.
Yep. The last thing we see is Time looking angstily out of her window as what she calls the rot spreads further. Ooh, plot. I'm eager to see where this goes, actually. You may have noticed between those 3 stories, the one with Rosemary, our main character, was the least interesting and added almost nothing to the story or Rose that we didn't know before, other than Caraway knowing her mom. Will that ever be important?
Maybe someday.
And so we come to the end of the first quarter of the show and the first video of what was going to be a simple first impressions look, but I was so inundated by this show's bizarre execution. There are a lot of smaller things I didn't bother mentioning because I genuinely could do a more length discussion on every strange decision in this show the creators made. I was going to talk about art style at some point and I just couldn't be bothered because it paled in comparison to the larger problems. There's also some odd animation here and there, but it's generally just kind of subpar at its worst and so not actually worth talking about as much as Braid PNG. Usually when I want to check out a 12-episode show, I watch the first 3 episodes, because I feel if by episode 3, if it has not given me enough to justify spending time on it, then I'm not going to spend my time on it. I have too little free time and too many other things I need to watch which I know will be good, I'm sorry. I just started watching TNG for the first time. I'm not 22 anymore and willing to sit through 70 episodes of Sonic X waiting for it to get good. So at this point, I would have stopped watching, to be perfectly honest. I wouldn't have hated this show or been actively angry at it or anything, but I would not feel there's enough here for me. But who knows, maybe the show picks up after this. I hope you'll join me for part 2, where I'm gonna tackle episodes 4 to 6. Also, don't go harassing the people who made this. This show is fertile ground to critique on its own. We don't need to get tacky about it. Besides, there's better use of that energy. Like watching TNG. TNG is progressive and has good writing. What a concept.
Okay. For 2 days I've been trying to construct sentences without personal pronouns. Now I give up. What should I use? It? To us that's rude.
Anyway, until next time, I've got links to Ko-fi in the description as well as Patreon, which I'm trying to get less scared of using despite using it for years. And okay, that's all. I'm kind of scared to use mid-80s J-pop idols for the credits anymore, so I really don't know what I'm actually gonna put here. I guess we'll see.